Georgie Somerset, thank you very much for joining me this morning. I feel really privileged to talk to you this morning. I think I've met you the first time around about 3.5 years ago with a Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade capacity building program that we conducted at USQ for a group of international women, quite remarkable international women, and you came and you did a presentation for these women, and afterwards we were having conversations about a whole range of things, but also how we could potentially infuse the entrepreneurial capacity building program in our own backyard in Queensland. And at that stage you were still president of QRAA, and in the meantime, you've moved on and you're just going on to bigger and better things every day. Every time I hear you're doing some incredible things out there. So, I think it would be wonderful just to listen to you today in terms of your journey. I think that's what this conversation is all about, is to tell us a little bit more about your journey and maybe some of the critical points in your journeys and how you've actually managed that and handled that. Because, myself and women out there, we want to know how you've done it. So potentially, we can learn from you as well. Mm-hmm. But I think before I start, could I maybe ask you to tell me a little bit more about yourself? And don't be shy. Tell us about the awards and so forth as well, because I think it's just setting the scene for this interview. Mm-hmm. So more about your initiatives and businesses and ventures so that we can get a bit of an insight of Georgie Somerset's life.
Thanks, Retha. And it's a real privilege to be talking to you, and it's fantastic to see this whole project starting to fly, and the fact that we'll be helping other women I think is wonderful, because that's been one of the things I think I'm passionate about, is that it's one thing for us to do it, but it's another thing to bring others with us. So we've got a commercial beef cattle property in southern Queensland in the South Burnett, and I've been there for over 25 years, so with my husband, and we've now got 3 children, and they work in the business, one very actively, and my parents-in-law are still there, so we've got 3 generations working in the cattle business there. We've got another property on the Darling Downs, and then we've also got business interests or farm as well. So one of the things that we've believed in is diversifying, so that we're not just relying on the cattle industry, and when things aren't great there, we really wanted to have some other options that could support us. So that's one of the things that we've worked on as well, is having the off-farm investments. So as I said, I've been there about 25 years, but when I first moved there, I was already running my own business, which was a marketing consultancy. So I might go right back to when I first left school. I went away to boarding school after having done distance education and School of the Air. And after boarding school, I went home to my parents' property in Western Queensland and set up a outback tourist resort for them on their station in 1985, and ran that for 2 years, established it and ran it. And so I guess in a way that was the start of my entrepreneurial journey, that I'd grown up on a property, so that in itself is a small business. So you grew up learning all about teamwork and working together with your parents and small business. But then the next stage was actually to try and set one up myself. And so I learned a lot in that first year, particularly about establishing a business that no one else had done at that scale. They'd done small things, but to actually fill 75 beds and 200 campsites and 20 caravan sites was quite an effort. So I learned a lot about marketing and about and a lot of that I think I gained from my parents' experiences, but I actually spent the next 2 years really teaching myself a lot of things. And I also learned quite a lot about people management, having taken 2 boarding school friends home to work with me. I learned that I had a lot to learn about people management as well. So I ran that for a couple of years, and then realised that if I didn't leave Western Queensland, I probably never would. And by that time, you couldn't defer university for 2 years then, so I had missed my university placement because I'd deferred for 1 year and then wanted to run the business for another year. I travelled overseas for 3 months in between the tourist seasons and seen the rest of the world briefly, and moved to Brisbane and had some part-time jobs, but then worked for a small business in tourism marketing. And worked for them for about 18 months, and that was a great experience because I was actually marketing other small businesses. So I was working very closely with them on their marketing campaigns and doing their marketing and promotions for them, but I was also learning about their businesses and what they were doing. So I was really around a lot of entrepreneurs at that time. Expo 88 was on in Brisbane, and Brisbane was just full of energy and life. And I was very fortunate then, because I'd been involved in the rural tourism industry. I was given opportunities to meet with people about that, and so my first board lunch was with a fabulous person, Sir Frank Moore, who at the time was chair of Tourism Queensland, and it was a real insight for me at a very young age. I was probably about 19 or 20, to see how decisions were made at that sort of level and how you could influence. So I went on to start my own business. So mid-1988, I set up my own marketing business and ran that quite strongly for probably 10 or 15 years at different levels. And the opportunities through that came to be involved in regional development. So tourism was seen as another option for regional towns. And so I was given some opportunities to learn about facilitation and regional development. Took those opportunities to work with some international people, and then got to work with a whole lot of regional towns and regional small businesses and economic development offices. So again, it was with entrepreneurs. So I feel as a lot of my time has been spent around entrepreneurs. And obviously, in amongst all that, I'd moved to the South Burnett and was also helping with our own business, our own property, and expanding that and starting a family. So that's sort of I guess in a nutshell, to where I've got to at the moment. What I was given the opportunity to do was volunteer in a lot of organisations. So with tourism, I helped establish a couple of industry bodies, the Queensland Host Farm Association and the Australian Farm and Country Tourism Association. And I learnt then about governance and structures, and I was a part-time secretary for them. So when the opportunity came up to be involved in a network of rural women, I could really see the potential. That was in 1993. And the skill that I could offer was media. And so I became the media coordinator for what was then the Queensland Rural Women's Network for 10 years. And what that volunteer position gave me was access to all sorts of opportunities and people, decision makers. It's hard to quantify how volunteers gain enormous opportunities. And I always say agriculture has been fabulous to me because there are so many ways in which you can contribute to the industry, but you gain opportunities from it. And that was probably, sort of one of the key things that I think has opened so many doors for me, was actually volunteering for that time with QRAA. I then took some time out. By that time I had 3 small children, and we had quite a bit happening on the property, and the seasons weren't fantastic. So I took about 5 years of just being really busy in my community, the local picnic races, the PNC, just with my children, running around to sports and running our property. We were feeding cattle. There's a whole lot of time needed with family. And when my daughter started preschool, I then was offered a position on the National Rural Advisory Council, working with the Minister for Agriculture on drought and how it impacts on production. And that was a fantastic journey. So I saw that there was an opportunity to do that and took that opportunity, and at that stage started to take on some board positions. And that's been a really interesting journey for the last 12 years. My daughter's now in senior year, and I've had some really interesting voluntary and paid board positions, and feel very privileged that I've actually been able to contribute to organisations at that strategic level. So our business at the moment, we've got the commercial cattle, we've got off-farm investments, both in sort of investing, but also in regional motels, and I'm on the board for that business as well. And then I also do my work as both a paid and voluntary director on boards.
Wow. You have had an amazing journey, and I think what one of the main characteristics of it is the fact that you're not just one thing. You're not just an entrepreneur. You're not just a family person, but you're also a community person. You're also an entrepreneurial leader. And to me, it seems that you have that ability to actually identify an opportunity and exploit that opportunity, and then add value. And it doesn't matter what context that is. So. If I can ask you, maybe, how do you see yourself in the entrepreneurial space? Like, how do you view yourself? Do you see yourself as an entrepreneur, or how do you see yourself in this space?
I probably don't. Probably don't label myself as an entrepreneur, but I think what I do is provide leadership, and I'm really well aware that I've got a responsibility to mentor others as well. So I think I'm not in a position at the moment to start, a new business in the traditional sense. But what we've done is take an existing family business and make it a whole lot more resilient and robust, and able to withstand, climatic and things. So I see that as being in itself entrepreneurial. But I do think it's also about, supporting other people in what they're doing, and I think that you gain enormous amounts from that as well.
Tell me a little bit about your mindset in terms of driving your journey forward. You're a very strong woman, and that's very evident from what you've achieved so far. And I think that does need a particular mindset. Tell me about how you see the importance of various aspects of the mindset in driving a journey like this forward.
Yeah, I think mindset's absolutely critical, and I was fortunate to grow up with parents who really did look on the bright side of life, and so and taught that ethos as well. It wasn't just taken for granted. So I do think that you actually do need to choose to find the positive in each challenge. There are, I used to say the great thing about feeding cattle all the time is that two toddlers fit in front of the Toyota and are happy to go with their father. I've spent a lot of time away from the family, but the opportunity for that has been that they've had some great times with other members of the family that they wouldn't have had if I'd been there. So I try and find the positive in what we're doing and when things are challenging. But I think it's also important to be kind and to be humble. And I guess I have I think that faith and family and friends are absolutely critical, that everything else can fall away, but you need some bedrocks on which you have your mindset and you choose to look at each day. And I think one of the really important things in life, and sometimes we get upset about things that really aren't that significant when we boil it down. What are the really, really important things? We've had some pretty tough times over the years, and I think that just gives you the opportunity to actually make the most of the days that you have got, because you've as I say, when you walk through the valleys, the view from the hill is absolutely fantastic. But if you've never walked in the valleys, you don't know how good that view is.
That's right. Georgie, you talk about you've had some tough times. Just tell me a little bit about maybe one example of that. And but you talk about plural, so there would have been more than one one specific aspect of it. So what I'd like you to also do is tell me a little bit about how you've dealt with that. How did you kind of overcome that tough times?
Look, and I think we're incredibly blessed now to have the internet, because I think that you can actually stay connected far better than you could in the times before that. I've been online since 1996, but it was much more challenging before that, I think, in terms of, for me, dealing with those things, the incredible sense of social isolation as well as geographic isolation, and managing those when you're self-employed and juggling a whole range of things. And I think that is more stark for women in rural areas than it is for men. And partly also because women are also trying to support everyone around them. I guess one of the most ironic moments, I remember being at a doctor's appointment and suggesting that I probably needed some antidepressants at the time, and I had a couple of very small children, and she suggested that was probably a good idea and I should probably just take things a bit steadier and slow down. And I said, well, that's fine, except that tomorrow I'm being announced as a regional finalist for the original winner for the ABC Rural Woman of the Year award. So this is 20 odd years ago.
Yeah.
And she just looked at me and rolled her eyes and she said, you know, will you never learn? And I said, well, one of my challenges is that it's staying at home that sends me around the twist. So I think it is understanding what you need, but also being comfortable, and where I've got to now, which is such a nice place to be, and I'd love to shortcut it for other women, is that you are enough and that you actually don't have to try and be anybody else. And even though I knew that, it was very hard to live that years ago. And I think that the sooner you can get to the space where you do accept yourself and you realise that you are an individual and how you do it and how you choose to run your business and raise your children and be a partner and be an entrepreneur is okay. And that we don't need to measure up to what other people's expectations in the world or the community or our family. So I think for me, I just tried to keep going, but I did know that I needed to actually have a reason to get up and get going, which for me was volunteering through some of those tough times, was actually, having someone who needed me to do something and be part of a team. But for now, it is very much that if you've got your core things around you, what's the worst that can really happen when things are tough? Mm.
Yeah. Georgie, did you have when you started off your journey, did you have some grand vision as to where you want to go or where you saw yourself going in the future, or was it a journey that just kind of unfolded?
Oh, look, I was not going to get married till I was 32, Retha. So the fact that I was married at 22 and by the time I was 32 I had 3 children was not quite the life plan when I left school. It certainly hasn't been the life that I would ever have envisaged myself. And there have been times along the way when I've written out my 1 year, 5 year, 10 year plans and all sorts of things. And while I still think there's some real benefits in that, I think that you've got to be really careful you don't try and cram so much in that you miss the day-to-day things. But I could never have imagined that I would get the opportunities I got. So I think it is about being open to opportunities. I remember coming home from one facilitation course with a couple of women from Europe who were quite amazing. And I said to my husband, I know I can change the world now. I don't know what it'll be about, but I've got the skills where I can, I'd learnt fantastic skills to be able to collaborate with people and help them articulate what they wanted to do. So learning facilitation skills and gaining things along the way, I think I've always had a dream to take it to a bigger platform. So everything I see, it's, well, how can we change the system, or how can we make this better for other people? But I did let go of sort of 5 and 10 year goals a while ago, because I actually found that opportunities arose that were far beyond what I could ever imagine.
That's right. So what's your view on, rural women going on their entrepreneurial journeys, whether that is starting a business or a venture or just making a difference in community, around whether there's a formula or a strategy that... Do you think there is something like a formula for these women?
I think they've got to be really clear about why they're doing it, and it's got to be their passion. I think if you're trying to do something that you don't really want to do but you think should be done, it becomes really hard work. So I think you've got to really believe in what you're doing. You've got to love what you're doing, or you see that it's part of a bigger picture of what you're doing it for. In terms of actually sort of a bit of a roadmap, I think you've got to, as I said, believe in yourself and back yourself. So there'll be times when people really question what you're doing. And I had some great advice once from a man. I was concerned about sort of the number of people that were dropping off. In amongst all of this, I coordinated a branded beef group in our area. And we dropped the numbers that were coming. He said, don't worry about how many are there, work with the ones who are there. Mm. And it was really good advice for me, that don't worry about the ones who didn't want to be there, just work with the ones who do want to be there. Work with the people who are in your team. I think it's really important to have a team around you, and that's not just a team in business, but a team around your family and around you as friendships. I talk about my village. Some people talk about their tribe. I think it's really important to have that team around you, have your, whoever it is for you that can scaffold you. It doesn't matter at what level you're at, you still need support. And we need to make sure that we're also that for other people, because we can gain so much from that as well. You need to be clear about your business. If it's businessing, it's the business figures and the numbers still have to stack up. You need to know your budgets, know your figures, do your cash flows, live within your means. It's really normal to go without for many years so that you can actually enjoy it later on. It's very normal in small business to have to do without. It's not just around agriculture. It's most small businesses, you have to put in before you can reap the rewards. So it is about being really focused on those budgets and cash flows, particularly when finance is tight. But for us, it's also been about bringing in some really good advisors. So having good advisors that are also looking at those figures with you and working with you, but know where you want to go and what your values and philosophies are. Part of the reason you're doing this is to educate your children, then it's really important that you're realistic about what that will involve and why you're doing it. Or if it's about, being able to build the business up so that you can sell the business, again, be really focused on that and share that vision with someone else who can help you get it to that stage. So I think you've got to know why, that Simon Sinek talks about the why, and I think it's so true. If you know what your why is, and if your business knows what its why is, or the organisation you're working with, the not-for-profit or the board you're on, if you've got your why right, and you can come back to your why all the time, why are you here, why are you doing this? The same thing, if you're heading to a meeting and you're wondering why I'm doing it and you can't answer it, then you maybe need to think twice about what you're doing. So I think there's no clear plan, but I think backing yourself is really important as well. When other people are questioning you, you need to be able to be really clear and articulate about why you're doing this and have the facts to back it up as well.
You talked about so many elements really of success. Moving a little bit away from that, not just elements but skills. What skills do you think are important for entrepreneurial leaders like yourself to progress further, but also for those women who really want to start on this path? And what kind of skills do you think do they need to hone as they move forward?
I come back to, I think, marketing, although it's my passion, I think it's actually a really important skill in business as well. So it's about marketing yourself. The first thing you've got to do is actually pitch yourself as the business owner, particularly if someone's going to invest in you. So getting your own brand right, understanding what that is, but marketing your business, because for me, every contact someone has with a business is a marketing opportunity. It's a touch point. And I see so many opportunities missed. And it's not just the normal things of customer service and marketing and brochures, but it's the other parts of the business. And when you see that being done really well and congruently through an organisation, you really appreciate what the result can be. I think thinking strategically, so that big picture, so getting out of the business and being able to sit back and say, what is it we're trying to do here? What is our 5-year? What's our financial targets? Being really clear about the return on investment that you're wanting, and being honest with yourself then, if that's the return on investment you want, what are you prepared to forgo to get to that, or what do you have to put in to get to that? So I think it's very easy sometimes in small business to stop fudging the figures. It's just not being clear about what things are costing us. On farms, you can end up with a lot of equipment sitting there that doesn't really work all the time, and have you run the figures on whether you'd be better to hire that, or does it stack up to you want it at a timely basis and you need it this week of the year, so you have to have it. So I think you just have to do those figures and see about the outsourcing. You do need to stay on top of your records. You can't afford to let just your basic governance and things drop in terms of even when you're busy in the business. And if you're not great at that, find someone who is. And I think, again, it's the communication and it's partly the marketing, but communication and building teams with other people. So either your staff, the people in business with you, your customers, your community, whether that's your business community or your community around you, you'll have some sort of community that you're having to work with, and communication with those people is really important as well. And obviously managing your staff and your human resources is a really big part of any business, and probably one of the most complex, I think. As we get differences in generations, and as much as we'd like not to be, we're all going to get older, and we're different from the generations that are coming on, and we're different from the ones who went before. So understanding those differences, and actually, I think one of the great things I learned early on was celebrating the differences we all have to offer. So I learned quite a bit about personalities and temperaments and things in my early 20s, and what that gave me was that everybody has something to offer. We just have to find what that is. And if we employed everybody who was like us in our business, it'd be a complete failure. That we really need those differences that will test us, and they'll challenge us, and we won't necessarily like being with them all the time, but we've got to celebrate those differences.
Georgie, you've been president of QRAA for a very long time. That's really a network of women. So the network aspect, you seem to be doing so well. Just looking at, how you operate and how you connect people and how you can connect with people. What would be some of the key, I guess, tips that you can give us around effective networking and building those relationships?
Yeah, and it's interesting because I've learned that this is one of the things that I can really offer, and I can offer at a board level as well, is what are the linkages you can create between people or organisations or opportunities. And what I have learned over the years is that most people operate in a silo situation, even within an organisation, or within a business, and certainly within communities. Different organisations are doing their own thing. And what I see the value in is trying to thread those together. So I'll hear about someone doing something, and I'll think, well, I know someone else doing that, and I'll try and link them together. So I do a lot of e-introductions. So I really try and network people together. There's absolutely no gain for me, but if it strengthens what they're doing, then I think that's an enormous benefit. So I guess I have the opportunity to meet a lot of different people, and I love if I can connect those people up with each other. And I don't see that as being a drawback in terms of competitiveness and things. I actually think that people who are working on the same sort of project can come at it from different angles. They may not always end up pursuing, but I think it exposes them to someone who might be doing something similar but different, or has a similar interest, and sometimes you see some great synergies and opportunities come out of that. I think one of the things I've really valued out of QRAA is the number of women who see something they think should be changed, they actually go and do something about it. And that, to me, is extraordinary, to have such a strong group of rural women who don't settle for, but and they don't simply turn up to a meeting and talk about how it should be changed and expect someone else to go and do it. They actually go and do it themselves. And the network gives them the strength and the capacity and the skills to go and be that change that they want to be. And whether that's on their local council, or whether it's, starting up a new magazine or starting a business, whatever it might be, I think having a group of supportive women that they can touch back into in the network makes a big difference to them in terms of where they go. But I think it's important to actually look for connections as well. We need to be open to connecting people. And it's a great exercise to go to a function and see how long you can go before someone asks you about yourself. Focus on other people. Be really curious. In amongst all of this, I actually did my freelance journalism degree and worked as a journalist on the regional paper. And what I really learnt from that was how to gain information from other people, or interrogate, as some might say. But if you're naturally curious about people and you go to a function, you can actually spend several hours before anybody asks you anything about yourself. So people love talking about themselves. So if you just ask some questions, you might learn something you never would have before. So just have the courage to say, beyond what do you do, but why do you do that? How did you get into that? Or what was the thing that led you to being here? So just go a little bit deeper and ask a few questions that aren't yes, no, they're more exploratory.
Very, very good advice indeed. Georgie, you mentioned the aspect of social media, And I do want to talk a little bit about strategies that you found that really worked for you in the past, and also you're currently using. And social media is part of that. Could you maybe talk about what works really well for you in the social media space, but then also maybe moving on to what other strategies work really well for you on a daily basis?
For just staying sane, Retha? Look, social media, I think it's a really interesting space, and I think no one could have imagined how much time people would be spending online. None of us, I think, could have imagined how that could be. I got quite involved in the Twitter conversation, and I still am on Twitter, and I go back to Twitter. I don't see it as where I spend a lot of time, but I do love it as a water cooler. So working remotely, what I can do is hop onto Twitter. I can follow some threads. I can check out some people that I enjoy or I value their opinion. Some people tag me, which gives me an opportunity to see articles I might not normally see. And then I can go back to my office. So I can spend 20 minutes doing that, and it'd be like being in a meeting or an office or turning up for a coffee. I have a few conversations, and then or I can read some different articles, and I can go back to where I am. So that's often what I use Twitter for, it's really an information. But I find it exposes me to different fields of thought. And I think rurally we often end up with a fairly homogenous view in the room, and it's hard for people with different points of view to have their say. Whereas somewhere like Twitter, you can find all sorts of different views, different commentary pieces, interesting articles. And sometimes I find myself sort of following a rabbit warren of people I don't even know, but really interesting topics and conversations. Facebook's become a really interesting space. To me, it's almost, it's a bit of a magazine where you decide what you want to read on the pages. And I choose to try and avoid as much clickbait sort of news as possible. I have to put in a plug for the ABC, obviously, because there's some good ABC articles. But I think that's the thing with Facebook, is you can tailor it. If you don't want those sorts of things appearing, you can actually stop them from appearing, but you can stay in touch with a lot of people. So for me, I've found it fantastic for staying in touch. So when I do catch up with people that I haven't seen for years, I don't have to go through what are you doing now, and do you have any children, and what are your interests? I can go beyond that straight to it was fantastic to see that your son was doing this the other day. How did he get involved in that? That's, say that's with old school friends, but then with, and the sharing of professional articles on there is really quite interesting as well. Then there's obviously LinkedIn. There's some really interesting thought leaders. There's some really interesting articles being shared on there. And the one that just baffles me is Instagram. I love it for the pretty photos, but my daughter's 16 and she can manage Instagram, and I'm just blown away by the number of followers, 75,000 followers of some rural women and what they're doing. And that's the thing too, is to embrace that there are new ways in which people communicate, and how do we actually use them to serve us. Facebook has so much capacity to build small groups and private groups, and I have groups for the family and groups for friends, and you see advocacy groups and things building there. So I think it is using it as a tool and seeing it as an opportunity to build community. One of the projects I'm really passionate about is that we founded a leadership program in the South Burnett a few years ago, and so each of those leadership alumni groups have their own groups in there, and then they have a combined one where they can interact with each other. So it's using these technologies in a way they're free and available, and you can use them to serve you. So I try to be really open to what's out there. I just don't have enough time to get across all the things that are there.
In terms of, I guess, other strategies that you use, beyond social media, especially in terms of connections, are there any other, like maybe offline tools that you're using?
Yeah, when I had was given the opportunity to do the Australian Rural Leadership Program, I'd waited years to do it because it sort of started as I started my family, and the time just wasn't right. But it really got me back into reading leadership books and texts again. And I think it is really important to actually discipline yourself to read. And it can be excerpts, but I think the discipline of reading and the rigor of focusing on a new concept and a book about about a new concept. Or I love biographies. I think it's important to actually balance with some of those things. When I travel a lot, I do a lot of kilometres, as most rural women do. I try to use podcasts. There's some great podcasts and talking books. I've done a mixture of talking books. Sometimes I need to just completely switch off, but sometimes you can listen to some great, again, biographies or leadership books as well there. But it's also, I do use the phone, the travel time to connect with people on the phone, that you can actually have uninterrupted conversations and stay in touch with people. So I think you've got to be quite deliberate about trying to stay in touch. The busier you get in a business, you need to actually make the effort to stay connected. There was a great quote the other day. Someone said that, be sure to continue to walk the path to a friend, because the weeds grow on an unused path. And I thought it's so true that if you don't make the effort to stay in touch with business colleagues, go to functions where you can reconnect with people, even if it's only for a brief moment, stay in touch with friends that mean something to you and your family, then quickly those paths do clog up. So I think there is some discipline and some rigor about that. But I also think it's important to just have downtime. And it's okay just to sit on your veranda and actually do nothing. Yeah. And I think we spend too much time thinking we need to be busy all the time. But my mother used to have a saying we're human beings, not human doings. Yeah. We don't have to be doing all the time. It is okay just to sit. And I think that's probably the other thing is that, and I'm not terribly good at this, but actually learning just to sit in the moment, to enjoy the sunset, to just sit with the family and not feel like you've got to be connected to the rest of the world, to actually have some days when you don't do the digital thing, or just to read an old-fashioned book. So I think it is about balancing it as well, for your brain and for your life.
Oh, look, absolutely. Georgie, maybe still a little bit on the topic of connections. In terms of the whole theme of mentorship, I know that, and I've spoken to quite a few women, even over the last number of weeks when I've been running some of these regional innovation pop-ups and so forth, and your name keep coming up as a person who mentors. Before I get to that side of it, have you had some really good mentors in your life?
I have, and I mean, I think I was fortunate to start off with parents who mentored me, who believed that we could do anything and actually did talk about business to us, talked about our life plans and talked through those things. Right through my life, I've had people who I've been able to confide in and be a sounding board for me. And they've been absolutely critical. And I think it's difficult. Well, I think it'd be very lonely trying to do this without having some sort of person to give you some feedback or ask you some hard questions about, why you're really doing this, or will this, give you the conviction to go to the next level. And I think for me, mentors are both men and women, some older, some the same age, some younger. I think that you can learn from different people. Some of them have been formal, sort of, they kind of knew that they were a mentor, and that was why we were in touch. Others have been wise people in my life. And I think that's the other thing, is just having the opportunity. You might not be there for very long with that person, but you might have an opportunity to really provide them some insight or some wisdom from what you've seen from afar. Or they might be, one of the children in your village, as I call it, and you might have a chance where their parents can't actually connect with them on that, or they don't want to talk to them. You get to be that person for them as well. So I've been incredibly fortunate that to have those people, and I think that gives me a sense of responsibility sometimes that, to actually pass that on. But I'm still seeking mentors. I've still got people who I bounce ideas off. It's there's and that's what I say. It doesn't really matter where you're at. You still need people that you can talk to and who scaffold you to the next level.
In terms of being a mentor to others, what do you think are the essential qualities of a good mentor?
I think you've actually, you've got to want to do it and provide that feedback. And I think it's really important to listen to them, to be actively listening, and to actually ask the questions, to have some sense of who that person is and where they're heading, or find that out so that you can actually ask them the questions about, is this going to take you where you want to go? I don't need to know what all their plans are, but I need to know enough so that I can ask them the right questions, so that and in a sense for me, I think a mentor holds the mirror up in front of you so that you can answer the questions yourself. A good mentor doesn't give you the answers, or didn't give me the answers. They helped me to look inside myself and find, where I was truly heading, and what's important.
Yeah. Georgie, the WIRE program is very much about, it's rural, regional, remote women, and distance is a main factor, no doubt about that. Do you think actually being in this space has ever been a disadvantage in your journey, or not?
Yeah, look, I think it's both. When I first moved, I'm 3.5 hours drive if I don't stop from Brisbane. So when I first moved to where I am, I was back in Brisbane every week, because I didn't think that people would really understand that I was still running a business. This was 1989, from a property. So I had a fax machine, and I knew I could do it all from out there, but I still felt like I needed to turn up to all the industry functions. The tourism industry had a lot of functions, and I still felt I needed to be front and centre to get the work and to be actually doing the job for my clients. So I think it ebbs and flows as to what you need to do. One of the things that distance gives you is perspective about what is important. And that's one of the things I think is great about technology. So I started using teleconferencing in 1987 because of distance. And so I have absolutely no challenges with running meetings, and I think people are much more open to that now. But I think there are things you need to be face-to-face for. It's very difficult to read the body language or what else is going on in the room, and just to pick up the nuances. But I still think twice about what I'm driving to, because it is a 700-kilometre round trip, sometimes for a 2 or 3 hour meeting. So I think it's important that distance is a challenge, but it's also an opportunity to give you perspective and really sort out what is important, and an opportunity to be organised as well.
I guess another critical factor that came out of our recent survey of Queensland Rural, Regional, Remote women is, as a barrier, is confidence. So I think it's a universal theme going across, especially the rural space, where I think there's this real need for women. They're doing all these wonderful things, but they don't always have the confidence, and they don't always see themselves as being confident people. What would be some strategies that you think that they can take to kind of fill that gap a bit for themselves?
I think one of the challenges for rural women is that they're often isolated geographically. So there isn't someone saying, gosh, you look great today. Oh, you did a great job on that. Thanks so much for doing that. And I'm sure there's a connection with that in tough times when women have worked off farm, they've actually really enjoyed being part of a team. So some of it is actually trying to build around you in your individual environment, that sort of supportive atmosphere. So whatever it takes around you to, I think, build the confidence. And often you need to give all those compliments out, and you'll then start to get them back. And be quite overt about that, because I think rather than just saying, oh, no one tells me I look okay, well, do you tell everyone else they're looking great today? And I think it's important to do those things. So I think there is an issue literally of that sort of being appreciated and being feeling like what you're doing is valued at a very base level, particularly if you're living on a property or running a small business. I think the other thing is that women spend a lot of time comparing themselves to other women. And if I've learned anything from the work I did with a fabulous woman called Patria King, it was that you are enough. No, you can't be anybody else. Everyone else is taken, and you are enough. And you just need to be the best you that you can be each day. And that's really what you can expect of yourself. But if you're being the best you can be, then that's okay. And my mother used to say, what everyone else thinks of you is none of your business, because they're too busy worrying about what everyone's thinking about them anyway. And I do think that there's a lot in that we can spend an awful lot of time worrying about it. And I'm not saying you shouldn't be concerned about what you look like and all those sorts of things, because I believe passionately in trying to be healthy and well presented and those sorts of things. But your inner confidence comes from knowing that you're enough, and knowing that you've got something to contribute, and that you have a vision and a passion for your life. And that's the fact that it's not like anyone else's doesn't matter. It's yours, and that's okay. And I think that's one of the things I love about something like QRAA is that I turn up to conference at QRAA, and you might not even know these women, but they're interested and they're supportive, and they want to be a champion for what you're doing. And you get a chance to build around you a cheer squad of people who will support you. And that's one of the great things I think about social media. While other people see negatives, I see an incredibly supportive environment out there, and supportive groups of women who carry each other through things.
Is this maybe one person, and there's probably several, but maybe one person that you really admire, and why?
See, one person is hard, Retha. Look, I think there's a range of people. I guess I look at, if we looked at sort of outstanding Australian women, I think that the leadership that Quentin Bryce has shown has been quite extraordinary. Her father was a wool dealer at Ilfracombe, and I love her expression that you can have everything, you just can't have it all at once. But I'm also a huge fan of someone like Ida Buttrose, who's just had the chutzpah to take on the challenges she was offered and roll with the punches and have a go, and has come back when she was set up her own magazine and that didn't work. She keeps coming back, and she's on national television at her age, and I think that's just fantastic. So I think when I look at those sorts of contrasts, and I could go on, I think there's a lot of really remarkable women doing amazing things, but I also think it's really important we have strong women in leadership. Jan Owen founded the Foundation for Young Australians, just amazing organisation that's gone on to do incredible things. And we need to collect around us and be quite overt about those leaders, so that when we think about leaders, we think about those sorts of women and what are the qualities we admire. I mean, when I look at someone like Quentin Bryce, I think there's also a grace under fire, that regardless of what's going on, she's been able to hold her head high and on every stage, but it's just as comfortable sitting around a campfire having a conversation with a group of rural women. So I think that's the important thing as well. But I've named a few there, but I just admire women who believe in themselves and get up and have a go at any level.
Yeah. What would be one of the biggest overall lessons that you've learned in life that you can pass on to other women?
I think it is that you're so much stronger than you could ever imagine, but you have to choose to find that strength. You have to choose to be positive. You have to choose to believe in yourself. So you have a choice every day when you get up. But you really, there is so much capacity in each of us to do and achieve, but we just have to choose to actually do it.
Okay. Last two questions. What would be, maybe one amazing thing that you still want to create to make a difference in the future? There may be many of those.
Look, in the rural context, I think there's a couple of things. I still believe that really cohesive national advocacy for rural Australia and having a really strong unified voice for Australian agriculture is it's still something we're seeking to achieve. And I think the other thing is, for me personally, we've founded, and it's taken a whole team of people and organisations, we've founded a small community leadership program. I'd love to see that sort of thing, particularly in Queensland, go further and, be in communities so that people can actually access the skills so that they understand themselves enough to work with other people and to be the best person they can be. So really that having a framework in place where people can access this sort of training, leadership development, business skills, I think, that's exciting. So I look at things like what the WIRE program's doing, and I think there's so much that can be achieved.
Georgie, where can we find you online?
Look, Twitter's probably easy, and I don't have an online, I don't have a website, but people can certainly search my profile and find me on Twitter and message me, and love being in contact with people.
Georgie, anything else that you maybe want to add to some of the questions that I've already asked you, that you maybe one final thought that you want to leave us with?
I think for entrepreneurs, it's really important to have that entrepreneurial spirit and run your businesses, but never forget what's really important to you. And I just come back to don't forget to live in the moment, and remember the important things that are your big. There's an expression about the big rocks in the jar, that if you put the big things in your life first and look after those, the rest will take care of itself. So while business is important and being an entrepreneur is important, don't forget the other things that are important to you as well.
Georgie Somerset, thank you so much for your wisdom, for all these gold nuggets of advice. And I can I can already see pulling that short little case study together with some really good advice points to our WIRE participants. And just some of the things that you said just resonate with me so strongly as well. I'm thinking, yeah, I've actually forgot doing that, and I've actually forgot doing that. So thank you very much for sharing, what's in your mind with us, but I think also sharing with us what's in your heart, and looking forward to watching your journey progress in the next number of years and into the future, and seeing how your entrepreneurial leadership unfold and all of the wonderful things that you will still achieve in the future. Thank you very much for your time. I know how very busy person you are, but you made time for me today, so thank you very, very much for that.
Thank you, Rita. It's a privilege to be involved, and I'm excited to see all the things that will come out of the WIRE project in the years ahead.